Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Wolverine Live here on a Monday night, August 26th. And it feels like the first day of school, Clayton. First game week press conference. Talked to Sherrone Moore and a trio of Michigan players on Monday. We'll run through some of the takeaways from that. Actually, kind of a little bit of a change of pace from the previous Monday press conferences we've had. I thought Sherrone was revealing. I thought the players had a lot of good things to say. So we'll get into all that. We'll see how it changes, of course, as the year goes on. Of course, with the game week, too, we're kind of going to put a bow on off-season coverage in terms of Michigan superlatives. We'll pick guys like top passer, top rusher, top receiver, categories like that. We'll go through that in our second segment of the show. And then, as we do at the end of every show, we will take questions from the chat. So be sure to line those up. We will get to it. Clayton Safey, welcome back. Good to be back. Good to be back in the swing of things.
It's like being reborn into football. It's like,
it's
like the new year. I mean, some people, consider January 1, the start of the new year. I think the Chinese have a different new year. I think, the church has the Easter is the new year. But those of us in football, this is the first day of the new year.
Spoken like a man who's watched every Jim Harbaugh press conference since moving on from Michigan.
We didn't get that, though, today. So somebody had to say it, right? Jim Harbaugh didn't say it, so they're the head coach.
Somebody somewhere said it, and maybe that somebody was you. Who's to say, right? So we'll get through all that tonight. Again, have a little bit of housekeeping to do. Have a couple announcements to make as well. We'll first start by shouting out our friends over at homefieldapparel.com. As you can see, we got 1992 Big Ten champions here. Want to rep the brand, the very good brand here on the pod as we continue our relationship with them. Head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Use that promo code Wolverine for 15% off your first order. I've got the screen share up here. Look at this Michigan collection. I mean, the script hoodie is amazing. I have that. It's more of a list of what I don't have from our friends at homefieldapparel.com. And there's more stuff coming on the way, too. They've got the football boxes. They've got, the Can't Miss Kickoff campaign with some exclusive stuff that you'll only get in their football boxes. Again, scrolling through the stuff here, that 97 Rose Bowl shirt is pretty awesome. They have a crew neck sweatshirt, a long sleeve t-shirt of the shirt I'm wearing right now. Again, this continues to expand. They do a wonderful job with their vintage-inspired Michigan apparel. And you know what you're doing, too? You're supporting a company right in the heart of Big Ten country. They're located just outside of Indianapolis. And again, I cannot speak highly enough about what they have added to the college football apparel sphere and added to my wardrobe as well. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Use that promo code Wolverine for 15% off your first order today. Also have a bit of an announcement to make. Teased this on the message board last week. We will be live, not from the big house, during post-game shows on Saturdays. We will be coming to you live from, drum roll please, or you can just imagine the drum roll. Ryan Van Bergen and I will be at Regents Field, 204 South Main Street in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for all Michigan home games. Some weeks, maybe Ryan zooms in. Some weeks, maybe he's there with me live. But I will be there every Saturday when Michigan is in town. We got 5 home games to start the year, but we'll be live amongst the people. Hope you guys will come check us out. Regents Field has already been a really fun group to work with, and that's where we'll be doing the show from. So I might have to get on a bird scooter to get over there. I might need to sprint over there. I got a wedding coming up. It might be good to, maybe sprint over, drop a few pounds and get those miles and those steps in. But we will be live from Regents Field every Saturday when Michigan is in town, probably about an hour after kickoff. That runway that we usually have will be a little bit longer to allow us time to get over there. But really excited for that. I think it's going to add a lot to our post-game coverage. And, one of my favorite things is being amongst the people. We've done our hangouts in Houston and Indianapolis. That's what always sticks out to me is the community and getting around the people. So that's where we're at with that. Also, of course, the housekeeping stuff that never ends. I'm rambling today, but this one's exciting as well. You can get on with the Wolverine.com using that promo code kickoff24, which is going to get you 50% off a premium subscription over at the Wolverine.com. And it's $5 a month. When you break it all down, it's less than a cup of coffee. I went to a national chain for lunch and a coffee earlier today. I paid almost $20. It's ridiculous what's going on out there. $5 a month is what you're going to get in on when you break it up, break it all down, do the math, and use this promo code kickoff24. So be sure to check that out. We're super pumped about that. A lot of great stuff coming this week. A lot of great intel from inside the walls of Schembechler Hall. So, Clayton, today we spoke to Sherrone Moore. We spoke to a trio of Michigan players in TJ Guy, Gio El Hadi, and Zeke Berry. We'll start with Sherrone Moore, and we'll start with the biggest storyline there is with this team right now is the quarterback battle. Did confirm it's between two guys, Alex Orji, Davis Warren. Heading into Saturday, they feel like they're close on making that decision. And I don't know if that's making the decision for what Saturday's game will look like, making that decision, planting that flag for what this weekend or past this weekend looks like. But those are the two guys, and those are the fellas duking it out for this battle right now. And it's really not anything different than we've heard the last few weeks, but that's what we're looking at heading into Saturday.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been surprised if he named a starter on Monday, but it does sound like they want more time, which is a little bit concerning in one way, but at the same time, he said both have been outstanding and they've made it a really tough decision. So you hope that he's right about that they're both playing at that high of a level. And he said that, they haven't informed, whoever the starter is going to be, that they will open the game. He didn't rule out playing multiple quarterbacks in games as well. And I thought the reference he brought up, the situation that he brought up in terms of, hey, he said, I've seen it work at times. I've seen it not work at times, playing multiple quarterbacks. And he brought up the Tim Tebow and Chris Leak situation back at Florida in the mid to late 2000s. And that definitely worked. And Tim Tebow wasn't known for his passing. Of course, it's part of the reason why he didn't work out as well in the NFL as, he would have liked to. He had one big playoff win, but Chris Leak could do a little bit more. And, Tim Tebow was, for my money's worth, he might be the best college player I've ever seen. But, they were able to successfully kind of pull that off throughout the season. So that reminds me a little bit of this battle just because Alex Orji can run the football. He's a dynamic athlete. And then Davis Warren, potentially a better passer. So it'll be interesting to see what they do on Saturday. He said everybody else will find out when the starter finds out that they have won the job. I don't know if he meant the entire team or if he meant the general public. So we'll have to see by the end of the week, Thursday, Friday, whether that's Saturday morning. He said those are all possibilities. So should be interesting.
Yeah, I know there are, not to call anyone out, but I know there are probably beat writers or media types that just have it in their heads that they know who it's going to be and regarding state secrets. But I truly don't think they know who the starting quarterback is yet, which on one hand, that takes a few different shapes. It could be what Cade McNamara, JJ McCarthy was a couple of years ago. It could be like what Michigan has had in the past where there's not really a guy that separates, and it is a concern if we're sort of projecting what the closest between the two options is. Probably closer to option B than option A, but we'll see. It's tough to say, tough to kind of project. It just kind of it's felt like to me over the last several weeks since camp started that at least with what they've seen internally, they feel like Alex Orji has taken steps to being that guy. But I think that Davis Warren has made a legitimate push for this thing, which clearly he has. The fact they're talking about potentially playing 2 on Saturday, and also just kind of bummed for Jack Tuttle. Just seems like the health hasn't lined up the way you would hope or expect it to be. But
for 7 years now,
I know, he's at this point, you're getting close to, you're probably closer to having arthritis than you are, that shoulder or whatever the upper body injury is from being in tip top shape. But I don't think we've seen the last of Jack Tuttle. I'll say that too, but we'll see what happens with all that. Other notable things from Sherrone Moore's press conference. Not anticipating any big changes for the Fresno State scout, just because they have a new head coach in Tim Skipper. who took over this past summer. Given that he was the defensive coordinator, a lot of things probably stay intact there. A lot of hype for, or maybe not hype, but respect for Mikey Keene, the quarterback that Fresno will throw out there this weekend. So that's going to be a nice little challenge for the defense. Any other takeaways from Sherrone that stood out? I think he was pretty forthright, but also a lot of things we've heard over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some shuffling on the offensive line, I think, too, going into the season, or at least early on in the season. And it's kind of interesting. You're unsettled at quarterback, and it looks like you're unsettled at center right now. You have Dominic Jadis, who has really emerged and is one of the top two at center, along with Greg Crippen. And, man, it's one of those weird situations because Greg Crippen and Raheem Anderson have waited around forever. Olu Oluwatimi comes in here. Drake Nugent transfers in last season. Both of them were Remington Award finalists. Of course, Olu Oluwatimi won the Remington Award in 2022. And then all of a sudden, I know it was 2-3 years ago now, but Dom Jadis transitions over from defensive tackle to offensive line and is now emerging as a serious contender in this center battle. So he may be the guy. It could be Greg Crippen. They're the top two. And then at right tackle as well, Evan Link and Andrew Gentry still battling. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar to last year where they didn't know exactly what the starting combination was going to be. You can still make some changes early on in the season like they did a year ago, like they did about halfway through the season in 2022 after Trente Jones got hurt. But it feels like there's more depth on the offensive line than probably they had going into fall camp, which is a positive. But a little bit of uncertainty on who's going to be where and who the quarterback's going to be. So I think getting that chemistry, getting things up to speed right away early on this season is going to be really important given who they play.
I was surprised about the center thing, only because it seems like sort of the storyline and the way that things were aligning was that Greg Crippen was finally going to get his chance after sitting behind a couple Remington caliber guys the last few years. And, not only do you hear that it's still a competition with Raheem Anderson, you hear that arguably Dom Jadis may have been the best of any of them, or at least is pushing for that starting role heading into Saturday. So not super, I don't want to say not crazy about that, but it seems a little less certain than it did when we talk about things that feel less certain, more certain since fall camp started. That's one that kind of raises an eyebrow a bit because we knew quarterback would be frenetic and back and forth. Not surprised about the battle at right tackle going into the weekend, but you hear it's kind of Evan Link is the guy. I don't think we heard Jeff Percy's name from any of the guys that we talked to on Monday. So I thought that was interesting, which is great news for Evan Link too. I mean, you don't ascend up the depth chart, with this Michigan group without having done something impressive. So kudos to him. That's great to hear because I think he has a bright future as well. But everyone, there were a lot of people that seemed obsessed about asking a team during its game week if it was going to sit down and watch the Netflix documentary that's coming out tomorrow, which was kind of odd to me.
And Sherrone Moore said, "I'll be watching film." So,
which is good to hear. That's certainly the better.
It comes out at 3 a.m. too. So,
is that what it is?
What's that?
I mean, I am not watching that until I've had at least one cup of coffee tomorrow morning. So, other tidbits. Jimmy Rolder had a great camp. It sounds like playing to his potential. I think at this point, safety seems somewhat set in terms of Makari Page, Quentin Johnson, Zeke Berry is playing both nickel and safety right now. Wes Walker's in the mix. Jaden Mangum's in the mix. Heard some good things about Brandon Hillman the last few weeks, and he's a guy that's repped with the ones throughout camp too. So seems like they have the depth they were looking for there as they sort of try to replace Rod Moore by committee. Anything else? I feel like I might have skimmed over a lot there.
Yeah, I think redshirt safety, the redshirt freshman safety, Brandon Hillman, as you just mentioned, is he going to be like this surprise player that, they brought in all these transfers, in the defensive backfield in the spring. So people just kind of assumed he was going to get pushed down. But like you said, Lamar Morgan said that he was repping with the ones. Sherrone Moore said he's taken his game to another level. And this was a super highly touted kid that, coming out of high school that had signed with Notre Dame, then got out of his letter of intent, ends up coming to Michigan late in the process, and people were excited about him. Didn't see him all that much last season. Had some huge hits and looks like a really big hitter. Then missed the spring with an injury, at least a spring game. So he's kind of that forgotten about guy, but there's always a player, it feels like, early on in the season that we're really impressed by, or that plays more than people expected, or that people forgot about. I think it could be him. I think for the general public, TJ Guy on the defensive side of the ball as well, who seems to be a favorite of Sherrone Moore, is potentially going to be another one of those guys. I know he's been talked about more than Brandon Hillman, but it's just going to be fun to see this team out there, see what the who the guys are that are really stepping up and can break out for this ball club.
Cam Brandt was a guy we heard too. I mean, it seems like he's for that edge 4 spot. I know there was maybe not a lot of uncertainty there, maybe more than it needed to be, at least in terms of how we talked about it, but it seems like they have a pretty good top 4 or top 4 they're comfortable with. And then you'll see if a Dom Nichols rotates in. Heard some hype on him and another young edge rusher that we'll get to when we talk about the players. But yeah, I think that, again, when we talk about position battles, it really just, it's quarterback and it's on the offensive line, which we anticipated one of those things. I think by now we were hoping to have a little more certainty with what they rolled out there with the offensive line. But it's also possible that they know and that it is just the talking points, right?
That's what I was going to say. I mean, they probably know, and even with quarterback, even though I do believe Sherrone Moore that they haven't told a guy that he's going to start at quarterback, they probably have a good idea of what they're going to do from a coaching staff perspective. And of course, you can make changes as the week goes on. I think that's probably why they haven't informed the team of a final call, just because they are still waiting a little bit. But for weeks, I'm sure they've had ideas, and that can change what it looks like in your head. But they're prepared for what's going to be coming, and it's going to be exciting, to watch these guys on Saturday night for sure.
Yeah, and the thing of it too is that when there is a battle, unless a guy is straight up run away with the job, like we've seen with a Zeke Berry or we've seen from a Jair Hill, if there's still some things to sort out, they're not going to name a guy a starter and then he has a shitty week of practice with the ones, and you get to Friday, Saturday, like, what are we going to do? Because there's not. It's all about game prep now. I mean, they'll do skill training, but it's you're in the season. So I do think when they hit the field for a walkthrough, all those types of things, there's going to be a group of guys that take those first reps, and I think it's going to be because if there was a game tomorrow, that's who would be out there. So let's go ahead
on the O line. Like, it'll just be interesting to see how close those really are. Like you're saying, and Sherrone Moore last year, it kind of took them a few games. Like, I know a lot of people were calling for Miles Hinton to be replaced, and I know he was playing hurt, but it took Michigan a few games to do that. He seems to kind of like to, stick with what he has until they need to make a change. That was at least maybe his philosophy on the O-line and as the offensive coordinator. So I'm just interested to see, how close it is and what what the strategy is going to be in terms of actually letting those battles play out into the season. Again, knowing that the schedule is really, really tough early on, for Michigan. It's not Colorado State, Hawaii, or UNLV, East Carolina, those teams. It's Fresno State, who's a really good team, won 9 games last year. And, it's Texas in week 2. And then, you still have some challenges right after that. A couple weeks later, USC. So it's just going to be interesting to see how they manage all this.
I want to address something really quick as we are live here on YouTube. It's not a pre-recorded show. Comment from Barry who says, are there Ohio State fans really on here? I can't imagine wasting any minute of my life on any Suck Eyes media. Yeah, there's a lot of Buckeye flavor in the chat tonight, which listen, we welcome all comers. We appreciate you driving those numbers up. Appreciate you putting money in our pockets.
Well, here's the thing too. They don't have anything better to do in Ohio, so you might as well tune into the Wolverine. We appreciate them. Seriously, from the bottom of our heart, we do appreciate you watching and commenting, listening. I mean, Ohio State fans, they're putting money in our pockets, so we do appreciate you, all you guys in there. Jordan, is in the chat. Appreciate him. And somebody asked too, is it good to have a soft team going into week 1? I don't know. They'll have to tell us. Maybe some Ohio State fans can sound off in the chat.
Oh, they'll tell us they're tough. They often do, and then we figure out otherwise. So that's welcome. Welcome to the Buckeyes. Welcome to the Spartans. welcome to EJ's friends down at Notre Dame, because, we know that Michigan stuff puts butts in the seats. And as far as, I'll just say it quickly I know the NOA stuff is coming because it seems like it has been delivered. There's nothing to address because we don't know what's in it yet. So I feel like we've talked enough about that. I'm ready to talk about the rest of the guys we did hear from during the Monday press conference here. We spoke to 3 players, was Giovanni El-Hadi, TJ Guy, and Zeke Berry. And I'll just kind of rip through the bullet points here quick. I mean, TJ Guy, again, reporters trying to get some sort of quarterback crumbs out of this team this week. I don't think they're going to get it. Says both quarterbacks have given the defense trouble. Called out Sherrone Moore in a good way for always believing in him and saying he's done an amazing job so far as Michigan's head coach. It's a blessing to have a coach that cares about him that much. I'm just reading through the notes I had down here earlier. I thought this was interesting. Said Josiah Stewart is not only one of the most talented players on the roster, but a guy who one of the guys who practices the hardest. And he said that when your better players do that, it sets a good tone for the rest of the team. Fresno State quarterback Mikey Keene, an athletic guy, maybe not a dual threat in terms of the statistics, but someone that they're going to have to push the pocket. They're going to have to contain him. They've kind of singled him as a guy that they need to keep an eye on this weekend. I talked about this a little bit earlier. A couple freshmen that got some props from him were Dom Nichols. He sees him as a player with a ton of potential. And then along with Lugard Edekpaye, who says, TJ Guy said he's going to be a really freaky, that's his quote, really freaky once the game slows down for him. So kind of the through line with all of these guys that we talked to, the approach is really no different coming off a national title. They know they have a target on their back. They know that their achievements, even from last season, have been called into question. This group really wants to kind of set its own mentality. So did you have anything to take away from what we heard from TJ Guy?
Lugard is going to be a freak for sure at some point. I don't know about this year, but 6'7", 230. Once he gets up to what, like 260, probably. He's got a really high ceiling. So the edge room, the future of it is going to be really, really strong. And that's just kind of what you come to expect at Michigan now. They just keep replacing these guys that are in the NFL making plays. Like, by the way, Jalen Harrell, 2 sacks in a preseason game. Braden McGregor had 3 sacks in a preseason game over the weekend. And now they have this new crop, Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart, those guys potentially in the NFL next year, at least Josiah Stewart. And then the edges that are coming up like a Dom Nichols or Lugard are going to be really strong as well.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy like Lugard, 6'6", 6'7", like you're talking about a guy like that who's super athletic, you want to put the weight on, probably winds up playing at 260, 265, sort of in the same mold as an Aiden Hutchinson, though. He has a chance to be a freak. I know that Charles Power over at On3 is a big fan of his game. We'll take a super chat here in real time for $5 from GT, who says, Buckeye fans should be more grateful for last season. It got rid of Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban, 2 coaches that they weren't going to be able to beat anytime soon.
It's not a bad point. You had to watch. I know it pained him watching Michigan win the national championship and win, beat Alabama in the Rose Bowl. All great memories for Ohio State fans. Win against Washington or Rod Moore's interception that broke their hearts. Seeing it was kind of sad watching their fans file out of the stadium on late November last year at the Big House. But I mean, Harbaugh's gone. The boogeyman's gone. Finally, they can potentially beat Michigan, right?
Yeah, and a tough schedule that'll get them ready for this season too. They're, I think ESPN's SP Plus has them as a 55.5-point favorite over Akron on Saturday. So they're going to get that work in, get his challenge. So what did we just hear for the last 2 years? Nothing in the non-conference. I'd venture to say what Ohio State will play this fall is as soft or maybe even softer in a lot of areas than what Michigan had to play through. But again, it's not that kind of show. So
which I'm fine with. I didn't mind Michigan's schedules. I don't mind what Ohio State's doing. So
no, play the games and win the games. I mean, that's anything other than that. It's the only thing that matters is the win, whether you're a 21.5-point favorite like Michigan is Saturday, whether you're a 60-point favorite, whether you're a 0.5-point favorite. That's all that matters is getting the win. Let's go to Giovanni El-Hadi. This one was interesting to me. Sort of again, they're going to keep that smash mentality from Sherrone Moore. They're keeping that intact, but this group has sort of taken on a life of its own in terms of the tone they want to set. Giovanni El Hadi said something along the lines of, we knew that we didn't come into this offseason knowing that we had to replace 5 guys. We need 10 because there's going to be injuries. There's going to be things that come up. There's going to be good competition. They were kind of looking for a name or a mantra to coin for themselves. Miles Hinton comes out with Invictus, which is not that's a pretty sweet reference historically, Latin for undefeated or unconquerable. It's going to be their rallying cry this year. That's something they're taking on for themselves because they want to prove that they have a lot of guys that have played a lot of football, but just not together and not in a ton of snaps because of who's been there before at Michigan. So, Gio El Hadi to me, I mean, I love the mental makeup. I like what he's about. He's a confident guy. Seems like a natural dude to kind of slide into one of those roles and be a tone setter on the offensive line. Really just impressed with him every time we get to talk to him.
No doubt. And Invictus, I mean, it takes a Stanford alum probably to come up with that. So good job, Miles.
Yeah, good stuff there. Again, I've tried kicking things off by asking him, you've had position battles on each side of you, who stood out to you. And in true, you could tell these guys were coached by Jim Harbaugh and maybe by extension, their media relations people in Ann Arbor, but who we love, by the way. They do an excellent job, but kind of just ran through everyone, all the names that we talked about earlier, whether it's Ben Crippen, Raheem Anderson, Dom Giudice, Andrew Gentry, Evan Link. Again, I feel like when you come in, we'll know when this game kicks off on Saturday. We'll know certainly by the Texas game kind of what they are, but it really did seem like they took the task to, took the task to heart of finding 8 or 9 guys, 10 guys. And that's when you start hearing Evan Link's name pop up. You hear Dom Giudice. I'm sure, Clayton, I mean, I don't know if you put out a depth chart. In fact, I know you put out a depth chart before fall camp. Was Dom Giudice in year 2 deep? Was Nate Afobe in year 2 deep? Was Evan Link in year 2 deep? Like, shout out to those guys, for earning jobs and earning the right to get into that consideration.
Yeah, they were in the 2 deep, but I didn't expect Giudice to end up at center, seriously battling in late August, or Evan Link to, potentially win this job at right tackle. I guess we knew he was going to be in the mix for playing time and has a bright future, but to see it right away, that's really important. And a lot of these big time offensive linemen who end up having these great careers at Michigan, the redshirt freshman year is kind of one of the big years for them. I know Zach Zinter, I don't know what you would call 2020 because you couldn't really redshirt. Everyone was redshirting that year. But then the next year, he earns a big role. Trevor Keegan, it was, his second or third year when he started to really come on as well. So it's kind of the time. Like, if you're going to be a big time player by that second year, you're ready to at least compete for a job. Ryan Hayes did it at the tackle spot a couple of years ago, or several years ago now. Time flies. So it's that year that you make that jump. And then there are the late bloomers like Dom Giudice, who just started playing the position at the college level a couple of years ago, and he may come in and start. So it's going to be interesting to see who trots out there. I will have the binoculars out during warmups. We'll be giving our pregame observations over at thewolverine.com. Promo code kickoff24 for 50% off. And it's reason to get there early on Saturday night, right? Cut the tailgate a little bit short,
Do what you got to do. I think a few people might need just make sure you mix a water in at some point, whether you cut your tailgate short or
only water.
For us, maybe. You wrote something about Zeke Berry earlier today. Any takeaways from his press conference?
He's splitting reps 50-50 at safety and nickel. So maybe that's somewhat standard. Now it's game week, but he could play either. I think they have way more options at safety, less at nickel, and he seems like the likely starter there. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Jaden McBurrows will get reps in the game as well. And maybe it's, situational. Zeke Berry's a safety by trade. Jaden McBurrows a corner by trade. So they can each play a different role depending on situation. I think that's going to be something to watch too. And again, speaks to the depth they have. When you talk about Rod Moore, shout out to the Ohio State fans in the chat, getting the interception against Ohio State to seal that one. A kid they didn't want to recruit out of Clayton, Ohio. Who was on the field with him during that play was Jaden McBurrows, who was filling in after Will Johnson went out with an injury. So these guys have experience. Zeke Berry actually a little bit less experience, but Jaden McBurrows has been out there in big moments. He was a big-time contributor in the Big Ten championship game win and shutout performance against Iowa as well. So there's experience there. And Sherrone Moore talked about that today as well, where he said it's not just the guys who are coming back and started last year that have experience. Other guys have played big roles. Now they're going to step into even bigger roles. And that's something to watch too, is that, yeah, it was unprecedented how much depth Michigan had last season. So naturally the guys were going to get buried a little bit based on who would come back and decided not to go to the NFL. But now it's their time. Gio El-Hadi's a great example of that. So many other guys are great examples of that. Marlon Klein at tight end, who sounds like he'll have a big role. So, it's going to be one of those things where we know who these guys are, right? And we've seen them, but the world will come to know who some of these guys are.
Absolutely. Any other takeaways from today? I think it's probably time to jump into superlatives, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Well, again, with the caveats being there are position battles, especially with the most consequential position on the field, take them with a grain of salt, but we'll start with the quarterbacks. Who's going to be the top passer this season? And I do think if it's not right out of the gate, maybe in the first 2 or 3 weeks, we see a starter separate himself. And I think it will be Alex Orji. So that'll be my pick.
It's so tough. I'm going to go with Alex Orji too. It just feels like a gut feeling that he is going to start on Saturday. I do think we'll see multiple quarterbacks, and I wouldn't rule out Davis Warren winning the job. I wouldn't rule out at some point Jack Tuttle getting healthy and earning some snaps as well. But I'm going to go with Alex Orji, and he's also going to get his fair share of rushing opportunities as well, and could be a fairly dynamic player.
Let me add a little bit of drama to this question. Who will lead the team in passing yards on Saturday night?
I'll still stick with Alex Orji. I think he's going to start, which would lead me to believe he plays the most unless they get up big, right? And then Davis Warren comes in and plays quite a bit. And again, I don't know what that rotation is going to look like, but we're just envisioning it as we go here. So maybe him. Could it be a dark horse? Like, let's say they are up 35. Could Jaden Denegal rip off a couple big passes and become the leading passer if the other two guys split the significant portion of the game? But I would imagine those two get a lot of game reps because they need that experience. And, so yeah, I would say Orji. Do you agree Saturday night?
I think so.
Okay.
If they're going to do the platoon thing, I wonder, hey, they could run a package with Donovan Edwards in the Wildcat and he pops one over the top for 75, 80 yards. I mean, who's to say?
He's got the best completion percentage in Michigan history.
He does, and he'll let you know it too.
3 for 3.
Speaking of Donovan Edwards, Michigan football's top rusher this season. Pretty much, again, I think we've both sort of agreed that it's going to be a platoon at the position. I think Donovan's your 1A. I think Kalel Mullings is the 1B. You'll have a plethora of other guys mixing in. Most likely Jordan Marshall, Ben Hall most of the time. We'll see if other guys can work their way into that mix. But this feels like Donovan Edwards only because, even if he doesn't have, if he's not able to replicate what we've seen, from a Blake Corum, which I don't expect him to. They're not the same player. They're not going to, they just don't do the same things. He can salvage a game by popping at 75, 80-yard runs. So to me, he'll probably have a few of those this year. I think that's going to put him over the top.
I'm going with Donovan Edwards as well, but I also think Kalel Mullings is going to be a beast and a huge part of this offense and what they're going to try to do. His smash mouth ability, running the football is big. And of course he does have some speed himself. And as GT in the chat points out, his completion percentage is pretty good as well. I know it's a sore subject for some people watching, but he also has a completion in his career down in Columbus, I believe. Actually, I know
both he and Donovan are 1 for 1, right?
Against Ohio State. Donovan Edwards 3 for 3 in his career, though. But
that's true. Well, hey, I mean, again, when in doubt, just throw it back to the old days. Run the triple with those guys at quarterback.
And shout out to. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, please don't do that. I spoke something evil into existence.
Shout out to the winged helmet on Twitter. I saw this stat today that Donovan Edwards is the only player in Michigan history with a 75-yard touchdown reception, 75-yard touchdown pass, and a 75-yard touchdown run. Again, that's a sore subject too for some, but he's had some huge plays with
pretty much did it all to those guys in that game, didn't he?
Yeah.
Top receiver. Now, this is a little more open-ended. I think we had the conversation, a week or two ago. Could Colston Loveland be Michigan's top production guy, regardless of position? I think the world's Tyler Morris. I think Samaj Morgan could have a nice year as well. I'm going to let you answer this one first because I don't even know if I know the answer to this.
I'm going with Tyler Morris, junior wide receiver, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was Colston Loveland. I would not be surprised either if it was Samaj Morgan, who can rack up a lot of yards after the catch. Of course, Tyler Morris can as well if you watch the Rose Bowl, but Samaj Morgan had more yards after the catch last year on average. He's kind of that type of player that catches the ball in space, makes some moves, uses his quickness and agility, and then his speed in the open field. So it could be any of those three, but I'm going to go with Tyler Morris. I think he's going to be that reliable receiver that Michigan needs to have on the outside, regardless of whether or not they have a great tight end. You still need that guy. Michigan had a couple of them last year with Cornelius Johnson and Roman Wilson, but it's going to be Tyler Morris, I believe. And I said it when we talked about the prospect of Colston Loveland leading the team in receiving. I don't think that is a great indicator of an explosive offense. So also kind of hoping in a way that that it's somebody on the outside. And then Colston Loveland is close and still has a ton of production and a huge role.
I gotta stick with, again, shout out to Scott Bell, who included both of us in his expert roundtable for his newsletter that we both were part of. So I went with Colston Loveland in that. So shout out to Scott. I will stick with that, even though I'm not certain about that at all. But I think the gist of the conversation we had was like, it's not the best thing in the world unless you have a potential unicorn at the position. And we think that they could have that. So we'll see what happens with him. We got two more of these. I want to go to the defensive line. Most sacks on the season.
I got Josiah Stewart, senior edge. I think he's just a great pass rusher. I mean, he's one of the few players in college football that has over 20 sacks on his resume already. In college, we saw him, 5.5 last year, I believe. And it just has more to show. And I think he's going to play more snaps this year. He's going to have the ability to impact games in every single situation. But his bread and butter is getting after the quarterback, and I think we're going to see him do it quite a bit. He could push double digits. But Sherrone Moore did say today that they want to rotate heavily on the D line, especially at edge. So other guys will get their chances. Nobody will make the most of their chances better or more than Josiah Stewart.
I'm going with Stewart as well. I think that there's an argument to be made for maybe a Mason Graham, just knowing that Kenneth Grant is going to get a lot of attention too. Again, if they rotate the way we think they do, was it a couple years ago where Mike Morris led the team with like 6.5 sacks? Wasn't a
I think it was 7.5. I think it was 7.5.
Okay. It wasn't a super high number. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that happen again. I think there's a lot of draft people who will tell you that they think Mason Graham is the best defensive tackle prospect since Ndamukong Suh, who he was able to rack up a lot of sacks at Nebraska. I mean, he put Colt McCoy in the torture chamber in a Big 12 championship game one year. Not making the direct comparison, but I don't think it's crazy to think that guy can have that type of impact, because typically with defensive tackles, you see them not play their best football until their junior years. So how much higher is the ceiling for him? We'll see. Probably not quite the same type of unicorn athletically, but I'm going to be watching him a lot too. But I will go with Josiah Stewart. We'll end with this one and then get into questions. Most interceptions, Clayton. I went with Zeke Berry because I don't think that teams are going to throw at Will Johnson. I think that would be very unwise to do. Typically, the guy that it's not always like this, but a lot of times the guy that leads your team in picks isn't necessarily the best cover guy. It's just the guy that is getting targeted a lot or making the most of those opportunities. I think very highly of Jair Hill. I think he could be in the mix for this, but I'm going with Zeke Berry. Mikey Sainristil still had a knack for making plays there. I think there's a lot of similarities just from a skill set perspective, and I think that he's going to step up in a big way.
The nickel led the team in interceptions last year. You said it. Mikey Sainristil with 6 had the most by a Michigan player since Blake Countess in 2013. So it's not a bad pick. I do think there's going to be a little more rotation there, though, with him and Jade McBurrows, as we talked about earlier, which is kind of scaring me from that pick, but I do like that bold prediction. I'm going with Will Johnson. It might seem too obvious. Maybe teams won't throw at him, but when they do, he's going to have a chance to make a play on the ball every single time. And honorable mention would be Rod Moore. If he was healthy, I would have picked him for this. He's a ball hawk. He's an absolute beast, but unfortunately, he's going to have to impact the team in a different way this year as Coach Rod. And but I'm going to go with Will Johnson.
I love this comment from Aaron Taylor, who says, "Oh, these Big Ten coaches are definitely dumb enough to throw to Will Johnson," which is also true.
Yeah, better quarterbacks now in the league, at least a couple. But these quarterbacks are also bad enough to get in, and part of that too is going to be when you have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore running after you. You don't know what the hell you're throwing at. You're going to throw it up, and number 2 may come down with it.
All right, I think it's time for questions, my friend.
Let's do it.
Let's go to this one from Mr. Dave, who says the Big 18 has announced their championship tiebreaker. Thoughts? I have not read through that yet. I'm sure that you have, correct?
I just love number 6. It goes down to 6 options. The SEC did it with 7. They came out with theirs last week. And number 7 for the SEC, number 6 for the Big Ten is a random draw among the teams conducted by the commissioner or designee. So Tony Petitti may be flipping a coin and have teams' fate in it. Now, it's not the worst thing in the world if you're in the mix for that and you don't get it, because then you may end up with a 5 seed. We've talked about on this show, and now I hear it on every show now. Not that I'm saying we were first. I doubt we were, but when you look at the bracket, the 5 seed is great to have, but you still want to win the Big Ten. Number 1, the tied teams will be compared based on head-to-head matchups. Number 2, tied teams will be compared based on record against all common conference opponents. Number 3, they'll be compared on record against common opponents with the best conference record and proceeding through the common conference opponents based on their order of finish within the conference standings. 4 is compared based on the cumulative conference winning percentage of all conference opponents. And 5 will be chosen based on the highest ranking by Sports Source Analytics team rating score metric following the regular season. So it's probably not going to come down to a random draw, but I would love to see this coin flip on TV, or they could add in number 7, just do an athletic director's vote like they did in 1973.
Is there an option in there where you can hop on a Zoom with Big Ten coaches and administrators and they can just tell you, dictate who the champion is?
That actually should be an option where if you're angry enough, then Tony Petitti will just do what you say. I think that's actually a great call.
I mean, that's the reason that Ohio State even made the Big Ten championship during the COVID season. So there you go.
Yeah, that's true. They could rip this up at any moment and make up their own rules like they did in 2020 or like they did last year with Harbaugh's suspension.
I think these are a little more binding. These times are a little more precedented as opposed to unprecedented. I think this is a good question from P. Maximus, who asks, how is it we don't know who our center is by game week? Now there are 3 competing. What about the QB exchange? Doesn't the center call out the blocking assignments? All of this was an unknown at QB. And I think that's totally fair. I think that's probably a little more of a concern than some will give it credit for. Now, again, what we aren't for certain with is it a 3-man competition now because of an injury? Is it a 3-man competition because a guy is playing really well and has put himself in that conversation? Is it a 3-man competition because your backup hasn't played well and someone else has a chance to grab that job? I don't know that we know any of that for sure. And I don't know that we will know that until later this week or even when we get into Saturday. So there's definitely a range of outcomes there. I think that, most great football teams are strong up the middle, and that's, on the defensive side of the ball with your defensive tackles. On the offensive side of the ball, certainly your center and your quarterback, no one touch it. The 2 guys that touch the ball every single snap of the game for the most part. I think it's fair to have a concern there because, all offseason we hear it's Greg Crippen's job. And then during camp, we hear he's battling with Raheem Anderson. And then we hear 3 names in the mix for it. So, yeah, I agree with fans that are a little bit concerned about that.
I think they may know, though, who the center is going to be at least. Again, we've gone over it, but quarterback, I do believe that is going to be something that they decide in the coming days, as Sherrone Moore said today. But it is something to definitely be a little bit concerned about, because chemistry between those two guys is really important. You heard about it from J.J. McCarthy last year about the relationship with Drake Nugent, how they put in the extra work. You heard about it the year before, the relationship between J.J. McCarthy and Olu Oluwatimi. So it's not like it's a non-existent thing. You have to build that chemistry. I imagine they're doing that. And as you said, as they go along this week, like this is the week where you're preparing for the games, and that's kind of when the battles are put aside a little bit, and you're getting more of those reps as you prepare for the specific opponent.
We'll stick with a quarterback battle question since we just talked about the centers. This is from Ferris Khan, who says, is Orji versus Warren a real battle or just a case of not showing their hand? And like you just said, feels like it's a legitimate, factual, real battle with some not showing your hand in it. I mean, they could make their mind up going into this week that they will play both, no matter what. But I don't think this is hey, let's name every single guy on the roster to not tip our hand, which was a classic Jim Harbaugh move. I mean, this is and has been a real battle all offseason.
There are benefits to naming a starting quarterback. Part of it is just kind of get the questions to stop and the fans to rally around a guy and the general public to just know what you're going to do. It's also to just get the pressure off of those guys a little bit, and so they can just focus on doing their job, to let the team know where they can rally around who they're going to be, to let the team know so they can figure out what their identity is going to be. There are a lot of reasons. So if they had reason to do that, Sherrone Moore would have done it, in my opinion. But I do think there's a little part of it where, okay, we're a little uncertain. We do want to see this play out for the next couple days. So we're not going to tell anybody, because Fresno State is, a team that can give you a challenge on Saturday night. Openers are always full of surprises. Fresno State's going to come with their fair share of surprises, with Tim Skipper taking over as the interim head coach. And you also have Texas looming week 2. So there's reason to get, not let these teams, know exactly what you're going to do. So I think it is a little bit of both. But it's a great question, because, but again, there's reason to name a starting quarterback if you have one, but there's also reason to not show your hand.
Sticking with quarterbacks, take this one quickly from RJ Hines. Does he think, or do you think that we could see Jaden Davis on Saturday? And I don't think so, because I don't think we're in a position where we'll see Michigan get up. Like when they played UConn, that game was 59-0. They played like 10 quarterbacks in that game. They might have the room to play 3, and it might only be 3 if Jack Tuttle is healthy and maybe he gets some mop up time late. But no, I don't expect to see Jaden Davis this year. They can play him in 4 regular season games. I don't know that those opportunities will be plentiful. So that's the quick sort of, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that, or is it just more no as well?
Well, what if he is the third guy? Then I think there's a chance. I mean, we don't know for sure that he hasn't passed Jaden Donegal. I know Sherrone Moore has thought highly of the way he's played. So I think it's possible, but no, I wouldn't bet on it.
Maybe
even if they are up big, you're looking at playing both of these two guys that do not have many snaps. Like Alex Orji's thrown 1 pass in college. Davis Warren, I believe, has thrown 18 passes in games or something around there. So you want to get these guys reps. This is a big, big opportunity for them on Saturday in a game that, could be tight at times, or at least for a while. So to plan for that too is going to be tough. You got to win this game, and I think that's their main focus.
This is not a Hawaii or a Western Michigan or a UConn. Like, this is a Fresno State has been good, but it could. I mean, that would be the best case scenario. But
right,
it'll be interesting because that's a good point too. Because whoever, by virtue of there being a winner of the starting quarterback job, the guy who isn't the winner is going to be the backup quarterback, and that guy has to be ready as well. So I do think that those two guys will probably take every quarterback snap, and unless things really get cranked to the next level, which is possible. I think this can be a very good football team. So that is possible. Would love to see Jaden Davis, because I think the world of him, and I think he's going to be competing for this job maybe as early as next year. So we'll see what happens there. $4.99 super chat from Michigan Go Blue 1234. We do have time for a few more questions there. the queue is full, so we'll get to what's in there and get out of here. Michigan Go Blue wants to know, what's your prediction for QB? I've got Orgy at 13 for 19 for 205 yards. I think if he throws for 200 yards, a lot of people would be thrilled with that. I'll say like 11 of 16 for 147 yards and a touchdown.
It's Monday. We're picking completion and attempts. I love the question because we're getting really specific here, and obviously diehard fans. So yeah, I'm in that range. I don't know. I haven't really thought about this. I'm gonna go 10 of 15. I don't know that they're gonna have to throw that much. They may be able to win this one comfortably, and Davis Warren's gonna get his shot too. So maybe 10 of 15, something like that.
Let me set a prop for you then. Say over under 24 and a half pass attempts for Michigan quarterbacks on Saturday.
I'll go over.
I think I'll go over too, just because both those guys will probably play. But I don't know. It's not I don't know what the props are for that, if there are any. A couple more here. We'll go to this one from, clicked on that one already. Theodore Dodge says, where do you guys think we are least deep position-wise? I'll just do a rapid fire here. I don't know that you're particularly deep at quarterback, for one. I don't know who's that guy's going to be. Defensive tackle scares me a little bit, just because if you lose one of those guys, it like fundamentally alters what your rotation could look like. Not super crazy about the depth at cornerback, though you've got some veteran guys there. But other than that, I mean, we've talked about too, left tackle could get interesting if Miles Hinton kind of struggles out of the gate. But there's not really a lot of positions where you don't feel at least somewhat comfortable with what they have. But I guess, I don't know. That's a tough one for me. Any thoughts on that?
One injury on the O-line could kind of shake things up and rock the boat a little bit. I agree with corner. I think that's the one that came to my mind initially, but they do have guys that have played snaps. Like Keyshawn Harris is still here. Miles Pollard is here. And some others. Ricky Johnson played quite a bit last year at UNLV. So there's experience there, but there's not necessarily guys that you feel great about, I guess, going in right away if someone did go down. So I'd probably say those two positions, O-line and corner.
All right, we'll take this last one here, which is something else we've discussed here recently. GT wants to know, I feel like U of M could still get in the playoff with 3 losses. Do you guys agree? And the long and the short of that for me is it just depends on what it looks like. You know, if it's 3 losses where you kind of get your skull bashed in, that's not going to be good for you. But if you lose by a field goal to Texas, or you lose, a tight game against USC, if you go down to Columbus and put up a fight but lose late, that could be good for you, at least in terms of a playoff resume. I think there are scenarios certainly where 3 losses could get you in.
Could is the operative word here.
It's a 12-team playoff. I mean, there is often a drop-off from those top 6 or 7 teams and the teams that kind of get slotted in behind them. Especially, I mean, we've seen LSU teams ranked in like the top 10 of the final preseason poll at like 9-3, so, or 10-3. So
you probably need to be a top 10 team. I would think. I think we're going to get a couple conference champions that might be ranked outside of the top 12, whether that's Big 12, ACC, or the group of 5, who's likely going to be the 12 seed. So there are very limited spots, but people are going to beat each other up this year in college football more than ever before with these the heightened competition in conference with these expanded conferences. So I think there's certainly a chance where we see Michigan getting in with 9-3. In fact, I predicted a 9-3 regular season and a playoff berth. I just kind of threw that out there, right? I mean, it's not the end of the world what our predictions are, but so technically I do think they're going to do that. So I think there is definitely a chance.
For posterity's sake, I picked them to go 10-2 in our football preview. I stuck with that in our buddy Scott Bell's newsletter, so I will stick with that as well. That's going to do it for us tonight. The next time we talk to you on Thursday, we will be previewing a football game for the first time in a very long time, since I think you and I did the game preview from the hotel in Houston. So
Yes.
it's going to be a lot of fun to get back on the swing of things for that. I'll be sure to use that promo code kickoff24 for 50% off an annual sub over at thewolverine.com. That deal's going away pretty quick, before the end of this week. So you're going to want to get on that again.
And Tuesday night at midnight. So get in.
Thank you for sneaking that in. I had no idea. I will see you guys. We will see you guys Thursday. I would love to see you guys Saturday at Regents Field for our post-game show. It'll be a late night, but you'll be celebrating a victory, hopefully, and we'll mix it up there. So for Clayton Safey, I'm Anthony Broom. Guys, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for tuning in, for watching, and we'll talk to you again next time.